Morning and good Shabbos, everyone. Someone once said that sometimes people spend their whole life climbing the ladder of success, only to realize when they reach the top that the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. This week's parsha, we begin the story of the building of the tabernacle, the Mishkan, the place of dwelling for Hashem. And the parsha begins with the contributions of the Jewish people bringing gold and silver and copper and precious materials to build a holy place for God. And we're going to learn about this for the next 5 weeks till the end of the book of Exodus. However, there's one law that the Torah says throughout the story of the construction of the Mishkan, and that is, Ach et Shabtotai Tishmaru. Remember to keep the day of Shabbos holy. Why is this inserted in the middle of the story of the building of the Mishkan? So rabbis tell us that God is telling us, building a beautiful edifice, a beautiful home for me, is of utmost importance. I need a dwelling place to dwell in your midst. But you know what's more important? To keep Shabbos. You know why? Because Rabbi Abram Yeshua Herschel said that Shabbos is a palace in time. There's a palace in space, God's home, the synagogue, the sanctuary, but Shabbos every week is a palace in time. And more important than the palace in space is the palace in time. And therefore, when the Jewish people built the Mishkan, they were told, 6 days you should work, and Shabbos stop building the Mishkan. Even though you're building a house for God, it's more important to build the palace in time than to build the palace in space. However, there's one palace that's even more important than the palace of space, and even more important than the palace of time. And that's the palace of self. Every human being is a sanctuary for God. You know why? Because God's neshama, his soul, is inside of your body. So your body houses the divine presence. And that's why in the verse, you know what it says? Vasuli Migdash, you should make for me a sanctuary. And it doesn't say, I will dwell in the sanctuary. It says, V'shachanti b'tocham, I'll dwell in the midst of the Jewish people. Meaning God says, I don't want to dwell in the sanctuary. I want to dwell in the hearts and the souls and the minds of the Jewish people. The sanctuary is a method, a means to bring God into our souls. So the most sacred sanctuary is our body, our self, our person. And that's why Jewish law says you can't violate Shabbat to build a Mishkan, but you know what you can violate Shabbat for? To save a life. Because a life is more sacred even than Shabbat, and surely more than a sanctuary. And here you have a very powerful lesson. When you come into a synagogue, you would never think of desecrating a synagogue. You would never think of violating a synagogue. It's the furthest thought from a Jewish mind. Shabbat, who would want to disrespect or violate or desecrate Shabbat? But sometimes we desecrate or violate or dishonor human beings. And what the Torah is telling us is just like you would show honor to a sanctuary and you would show honor to Shabbat. Tonight we're going to have wine and challah and kiddush and dress in our finest clothing because we have to honor Shabbat. Even more so we should honor human beings because there is nothing more sacred than your fellow man who has a divine soul inside of them. It's a story told, a true story. There's a man in South Africa, an observant Jew, his name is Kivi Bernard. And he's a businessman and he wrote a book called Leopardology. It's about hunting for business in a tough market, and his book became a bestseller. And he tells the following true story, that he got a call one day. He was being invited to give talks all over Fortune 500 companies. He was on all the TV shows. His book was an instant success, Leopardology. Financial book. He gets a call from someone from Microsoft. They say, we're having a big conference for our company. We heard about your book and we want to invite you to be the keynote speaker at our address. He was so honored and flattered. And they said, Bill Gates is going to be there too. So he was flattered, he was honored. This was a big thing for him. Climbing the ladder of success, right? This is pretty much the highest you're going to get. He says, okay, I'd love to. What's the date? He looks at the calendar and the date. It's Shabbos. He said, I'm really sorry, but I'm an observant Jew. It's Saturday, Shabbat. I don't do public speaking performances. I can't do it. Any other day, but not Shabbat. They say, is the price not enough? We'll offer you more. He says, it's not about money. It's Shabbat. I don't speak on Shabbat. It's my day of rest. They said, we're willing to double your fee. He says, I can't. We'll triple it. Can't. The guy never heard of such a thing. He said, okay, let me look into it. They called him back and they said, you know what? We really want you to be the keynote. We're going to change the conference to Sunday. And sure enough, he went and he spoke on Sunday. A while later, he gets a call from this executive from Microsoft. He says, I got to tell you a story. He says, I was flying with Bill Gates on his private jet somewhere, and we were talking, and he asked me, why did we change the conference from Saturday to Sunday? I told him the whole story that I called this guy Kivi Burnett to be the keynote. He said he can't speak on Saturday, and he wouldn't budge. They offered him double the fee, triple the fee, so we had to move it to Sunday. He said, I had to call you back and tell you what Bill Gates said. He said, Bill Gates said, I'm a man who can pretty much buy anything. He's worth, I don't know, 50, 60 billion dollars. He said, anything I set my eyes on, with the right price, I can buy anything. He says, the first time I found something that my money can't buy. And that's the beauty of having something that money can't buy. There's some things that are more precious even than the gold and the silver and the copper, and all the beautiful things that we build a sanctuary. And that is Shabbat and a fellow human being. And that is the message of the Torah portion of the Mishkan. What is leadership? Leadership is leading yourself to your true self. To live by certain values and principles that are unshakable, unmovable. When you live that kind of a life, then you bring the sanctity of God, not just into the physical structure, but into your personal life. And that is the elevation, truma, that we get from this week's message of the holiness of space, time, and person.